What if I told you that right now, somewhere in the world, there's a man watching, waiting, planning something so twisted that when you hear these stories, you'll never feel safe walking alone again. Tonight I'm sharing 6 true stories about mystery men who turned ordinary places into scenes of absolute terror. These aren't fictional tales. These are real events that happen to real people. And the most terrifying part? Most of these men were never caught. So turn off your lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself for stories that will make you question every shadow, every strange noise, and every person you pass on the street. Because after tonight, you'll realize that monsters don't just exist in movies. They live among us. Sarah Mitchell thought she was losing her mind. For 3 weeks straight, every night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., she would wake up to the sound of tapping on her bedroom window. But here's the thing. Sarah lived on the 3rd floor of her apartment building. The first few nights, she convinced herself it was just tree branches. But there were no trees near her window. Then she thought maybe it was the building settling. But buildings don't settle in such a rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Always 3 taps. Always at 2:17 a.m. Sarah started losing sleep. Dark circles formed under her eyes. Her friends noticed she was jumpy, constantly looking over her shoulder. But when she tried to explain about the tapping, they suggested she see a doctor. Then came the night that changed everything. Sarah had installed a security camera pointing toward her window. She was determined to prove to herself and everyone else that she wasn't imagining things. At 2:16 a.m., she positioned herself in front of her computer screen, ready to finally solve this mystery. 2:17 a.m. came and went. No tapping. Sarah felt relief washing over her. Maybe it had finally stopped. Maybe she could finally get some sleep. But then, she decided to check the camera footage from the previous nights. What she saw made her blood run cold. There, clear as day, was a tall figure in dark clothing, standing on the fire escape outside her window. But this wasn't just someone who had wandered up there by accident. This man had been coming to her window every single night for weeks. And he wasn't just tapping randomly. He was spelling something out in Morse code. Sarah's hands trembled as she translated the message. "I'm coming in soon." She called the police immediately. When they arrived, they found scratches around her window lock. Fresh scratches. Someone had been trying to break in, getting a little further each night. The officers searched the building and found a homeless shelter ID in the stairwell. It belonged to Marcus Webb, a man with a history of stalking and breaking into women's homes. But when they went to arrest him, Marcus was gone. He had vanished from the shelter 3 days earlier, and no one had seen him since. Sarah moved out the next day. But 6 months later, she started receiving letters at her new address. Letters with no return address, containing only 3 words. "Found you again." The letters stopped after the 4th one. Sarah never found out why. But sometimes, late at night, she still wakes up at exactly 2:17 a.m., listening for that familiar tapping sound. Marcus Webb was never found. Jennifer Walsh was the kind of teacher every parent wanted for their child. Patient, caring, and absolutely dedicated to her students. So, when she didn't show up for work on a Monday morning in October 2019, everyone knew something was wrong. The principal, Mrs. Davidson, tried calling Jennifer multiple times. No answer. She sent another teacher to Jennifer's apartment. No one came to the door. But her car was still in the parking lot. By Tuesday, the police were involved. They found Jennifer's apartment unlocked, her purse and keys on the kitchen counter, but no sign of Jennifer herself. But here's where this story takes a terrifying turn. On Wednesday, a substitute teacher showed up at the school. He said his name was David Collins and that the district had sent him to cover Jennifer's class. He had all the proper paperwork, seemed to know the curriculum, and even knew some of the students' names. For 2 weeks, David Collins taught Jennifer's 5th grade class. The children liked him. He was funny, engaging, and seemed to genuinely care about their education. The other teachers found him a bit quiet, but pleasant enough. Then Jennifer's body was found. A hiker discovered her remains in a shallow grave about 40 miles from town. The medical examiner determined she had been killed approximately 2 weeks earlier, the same day she went missing. The same day before David Collins appeared at the school. When police rushed to the school to question David Collins, they made a chilling discovery. There was no substitute teacher by that name in the district system. In fact, there was no record of David Collins anywhere. No employment history, no background check, no social security number on file. The man who had been teaching Jennifer's class for 2 weeks didn't exist. But it gets worse. When investigators searched the classroom, they found Jennifer's personal lesson plans hidden in the supply closet. Her handwriting was on them. David Collins had been using her own plans to teach her class, as if nothing had happened. The children were interviewed by child psychologists. Several of them mentioned that Mr. Collins had asked strange questions. Questions about their home addresses, their parents' work schedules, and whether they walked home alone. One little girl, Emma, said that Mr. Collins had given her a special assignment. He wanted her to draw a map of her neighborhood, marking which houses had dogs and which ones didn't. David Collins disappeared the night Jennifer's body was found. Security cameras showed him leaving the school building, but his face was always turned away from the cameras, as if he knew exactly where they were positioned. The investigation revealed that Jennifer's murder had been planned for weeks. Someone had been watching her, learning her routines, studying her classroom, and when they killed her, they were ready to step right into her life. But who was David Collins? How did he know so much about teaching? How did he forge all those documents? And most terrifying of all, why did he choose to hide in plain sight, surrounded by children? Those questions have never been answered. David Collins, or whoever he really was, vanished without a trace. But Jennifer's students still talk about their substitute teacher, how his eyes seemed too old for his face, how his smile never quite reached his eyes, and how, sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, they caught him staring at them with an expression that made their skin crawl. Working the night shift at a gas station is already creepy enough, but for 22-year-old Mike Torino, what should have been a quiet job became a living nightmare. It started with the security cameras. Mike had been working at the Sunoco station for about 3 months when he noticed something odd. Every night around 3 a.m., the camera feed would cut out for exactly 7 minutes. Then it would come back online, as if nothing had happened. At first, Mike figured it was just a technical glitch. Old equipment probably needed updating. But then he started noticing that things were different after those 7 minutes. Items would be moved slightly on the shelves. The coffee pot would be turned off when he was sure he'd left it on. Small things, easy to dismiss. Until the night he found the note. It was tucked under a pack of cigarettes, written in neat handwriting. "You make good coffee. Thank you for leaving it on." Mike's hands shook as he read it. Someone had been in the store. Someone had been drinking his coffee. But how? The doors were locked, the alarm was set, and Mike never left his post behind the counter. The next night, Mike decided to stay alert during the camera blackout. At exactly 3 a.m., the screens went dark. Mike grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the back of the store, his heart pounding in his chest. That's when he heard it. The soft sound of someone humming. The humming was coming from the storage room. Mike approached the door slowly, his flashlight beam trembling. The humming stopped. Everything went silent. Mike pressed his ear to the door. Nothing. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. The storage room was empty, but there was a fresh cup of coffee sitting on one of the boxes, still warm. Mike ran back to the counter and called his manager. But when his manager arrived 20 minutes later, there was no coffee cup, no evidence that anyone had been there. "You're working too many night shifts, kid," his manager said. "Maybe you should take a few days off." But Mike couldn't let it go. The next night, he brought a digital camera. At 2:55 a.m., he positioned himself with a clear view of the entire store. When the security cameras went dark, Mike started recording with his own camera. What he captured made him quit his job the next morning. A man emerged from behind the greeting card display. He was tall, thin, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. But here's the part that made Mike's blood freeze. The man moved through the store like he owned it. He knew exactly where everything was. He walked behind the counter, made himself a cup of coffee, and sat down in Mike's chair. For 7 minutes, this stranger sat in Mike's spot, drinking coffee and reading a magazine. He seemed completely at ease, as if this was his routine. But the most terrifying part was when the man looked directly into Mike's camera. He smiled and waved, like he knew Mike was recording him. Then, just before the 7 minutes were up, the man walked back to the greeting card display and simply vanished. One moment he was there, the next moment he was gone. Mike took the footage to the police. They investigated but found no signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No way anyone could have gotten into the locked store. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The previous night shift worker had quit suddenly 6 months earlier. He told his friends he was being visited by someone during his shifts, but no one believed him. And the worker before that? He had reported similar incidents before transferring to the day shift. This mystery man had been visiting the gas station for over a year, and no one had been able to catch him or figure out how he was getting inside. Mike moved to another city 2 weeks later, but sometimes, late at night, he still wonders if somewhere out there, a gas station worker is making coffee for a visitor who shouldn't exist. Amanda and Steve's wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. They had planned every detail perfectly: the venue, the flowers, the music, and most importantly, their photographer. They had hired Jonathan Miles, a photographer with an impressive portfolio and glowing reviews. His work was beautiful, artistic, and he seemed to capture emotions in a way that made every photo tell a story. The wedding went perfectly. Jonathan was professional, unobtrusive, and seemed to be everywhere at once, capturing every precious moment. Amanda and Steve were thrilled with his work during the ceremony. "We can't wait to see the photos," Amanda told Jonathan as the reception was winding down. "You'll have them within 2 weeks," Jonathan replied with a warm smile. "I promise they'll be worth the wait." 2 weeks passed. No photos. Amanda called Jonathan's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She sent emails that bounced back. She tried reaching him through his website, but it was no longer online. Panic set in. Their wedding photos, the only record of the most important day of their lives, were gone. along with the 30. They had paid Jonathan. Amanda and Steve filed a police report, thinking they were victims of a simple scam. But the investigation revealed something far more sinister. Jonathan Miles didn't exist. The name was fake, the business license was forged, and the address he had given them was an abandoned warehouse. But the most disturbing discovery came when police looked into his photography portfolio. Every single photo in Jonathan's portfolio had been stolen from other photographers' websites. He had built his entire fake business using other people's work. But if Jonathan wasn't really a photographer, why had he shown up to their wedding with professional equipment and obvious skill? The answer came when police found Jonathan's real identity. Marcus Holloway, a convicted sex offender with a history of using fake identities to gain access to private events. But Amanda and Steve's case wasn't isolated. Over the next few months, police discovered that Jonathan Miles had photographed at least 12 other weddings in the past year. In every case, he disappeared with the photos and the money. But it wasn't about the money. When investigators finally tracked down Marcus Holloway, they found something that made this case infinitely more disturbing. In his apartment, they discovered thousands of photos from all the weddings he had photographed. But these weren't normal wedding photos. Marcus had been taking close-up shots of children at these events. Candid photos of young bridesmaids, flower girls, and other children attending the weddings. He had created detailed photo albums focusing solely on the minors at each event. Even worse, some of the photos had been taken in areas where the children were changing clothes or using the bathroom. Marcus had used his position as the official photographer to gain access to private areas where children were vulnerable. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been selling these photos online to other predators. He had turned innocent family celebrations into hunting grounds. Marcus Holloway was arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the damage was done. Dozens of families discovered that their most precious memories had been violated by a predator who had posed as someone they trusted. Amanda and Steve never got their wedding photos back. But they consider themselves lucky compared to the families with young children who attended those weddings. The most chilling part of this story? Marcus had been perfecting this scheme for years. Police found evidence that he had used similar tactics at birthday parties, family reunions, and other private events across multiple states. How many other photographers out there aren't who they claim to be? How many other predators are using fake identities to gain access to your family events? The next time you hire someone to capture your precious memories, remember Amanda and Steve's story. Because sometimes, the person behind the camera is capturing more than just smiles. When elderly Mrs. Patterson moved into the quiet suburban neighborhood, she thought she had found the perfect place to spend her retirement. The houses were well maintained, the neighbors seemed friendly, and crime was practically non-existent. But Mrs. Patterson had mobility issues, and simple tasks like grocery shopping and yard work had become difficult for her. That's when her neighbor, Robert Chen, stepped in to help. Robert lived alone in the house next door. He was in his 40s, soft-spoken, and incredibly generous with his time. He offered to do Mrs. Patterson's grocery shopping, help with her yard work, and even check on her daily to make sure she was okay. "You're too kind, Robert," Mrs. Patterson would tell him. "I don't know what I'd do without you." For 6 months, Robert was the perfect neighbor. He never asked for money, never seemed to want anything in return. He just genuinely appeared to care about Mrs. Patterson's well-being. But Mrs. Patterson's daughter, Lisa, was suspicious. "Mom, you barely know this man," Lisa said during one of her visits. "Why is he being so helpful? What does he want?" "Not everyone has ulterior motives, dear," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Robert is just a good person." But Lisa's suspicions grew when she noticed that Robert always seemed to know when she was visiting her mother. He would find excuses to come over when Lisa was there, asking about her work schedule, her family, her address. "He gives me the creeps, Mom," Lisa told her. "There's something off about him." Mrs. Patterson dismissed her daughter's concerns. Robert had been nothing but helpful. He had keys to her house so he could help with emergencies. He knew her daily routine so he could check on her effectively. He was exactly the kind of neighbor everyone wishes they had. Then Mrs. Patterson had a stroke. Lisa rushed to the hospital and spent 3 days by her mother's bedside. When Mrs. Patterson was stable enough to go home, Lisa decided to stay for a week to help with her recovery. But when they arrived at Mrs. Patterson's house, something was wrong. Items had been moved. Personal papers were out of place. Mrs. Patterson's jewelry box had been opened and rifled through, but nothing seemed to be missing. "Robert has been taking care of the house while I was in the hospital," Mrs. Patterson explained. "He was probably just cleaning." But Lisa noticed something that made her stomach turn. In her mother's bedroom, the sheets on the bed had been changed, but they were put on incorrectly. The fitted sheet was inside out, and the pillowcases were on backwards. Why would Robert Chen be changing her mother's bed sheets? Lisa installed a hidden security camera in the living room while her mother was napping. She told her mother she was going back to her hotel, but instead, she parked down the street and waited. At 9 p.m., Robert's car pulled into the driveway. He used his key to enter the house, apparently thinking Mrs. Patterson was still in the hospital. What Lisa saw on the security camera made her call the police immediately. Robert wasn't just checking on the house. He was going through Mrs. Patterson's personal belongings systematically. He was taking photos of family pictures, reading through personal letters, and examining financial documents. But the most disturbing part was when Robert went into Mrs. Patterson's bedroom. He lay down on her bed, put his face against her pillow, and stayed there for several minutes. When police arrived and searched Robert's house, they found a shrine dedicated to Mrs. Patterson. Her photos were everywhere, along with items he had been slowly stealing from her house: a scarf, a coffee mug, a small perfume bottle. They also found detailed notes about Mrs. Patterson's daily routine, her medical conditions, her family members, and her financial situation. But Robert Chen wasn't his real name. His real name was David Walsh, and he had been targeting elderly women for over a decade. His pattern was always the same: find a vulnerable elderly woman, gain her trust by being helpful, then slowly invade every aspect of her life. Police discovered that David had planned helped at least 8 other elderly women in different cities. 2 of those women had died under suspicious circumstances, and their wills had been changed to leave money to their helpful neighbor. Mrs. Patterson had been next on his list. The investigation revealed that David would research his targets for months before approaching them. He knew about Mrs. Patterson's daughter, her financial situation, and her health problems before he ever introduced himself. David Walsh was sentenced to 25 years in prison for stalking, theft, and fraud. But the psychological damage to Mrs. Patterson was irreversible. She never felt safe in her own home again. The most terrifying part? David had perfected his technique over many years. He knew exactly how to gain an elderly person's trust, how to make himself seem indispensable, and how to manipulate their emotions. How many other helpful neighbors are out there, watching and waiting for the perfect victim? How many elderly people are being targeted by predators who hide behind kind gestures and friendly smiles? Mrs. Patterson's story is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most helpful. The packages started arriving on a Tuesday. Single mother Jessica Torres was working from home when her doorbell rang. A delivery man stood on her porch holding a small package addressed to her 8-year-old daughter, Emma. "I didn't order anything for Emma," Jessica told the delivery man. The man, who wore a standard delivery uniform and seemed professional enough, checked his tablet. "It shows as paid for and confirmed delivery to this address," he said. "Maybe it's a gift from a relative?" Jessica signed for the package, thinking it might be from Emma's grandmother. Inside was a small stuffed animal, a cute teddy bear, with no gift receipt or return address. Emma loved it. The next week, another package arrived. Same delivery man, another small toy for Emma. Then another the following week. And another. At first, Jessica was puzzled, but not alarmed. Maybe someone in the family was sending Emma surprise gifts and wanted to remain anonymous. Emma was delighted with each new toy, and they all seemed age-appropriate and harmless. But Jessica started to notice something odd about the delivery man. He always asked questions. Casual questions that seemed innocent at first. Is Emma enjoying her new toy? Does she play with it in her bedroom? What time does she usually get home from school? When Jessica mentioned that she worked from home, the delivery man seemed very interested. "So Emma comes straight home after school? That's nice. She must feel safe with Mom always here." The questions made Jessica uncomfortable, but she told herself she was being paranoid. The man was just being friendly, making conversation. Then Emma started talking about her friend. "The nice delivery man waved at me through my bedroom window," Emma told her mother one evening. Jessica's blood went cold. "What do you mean he waved at you?" "When I was playing with my toys, I saw him in the backyard. He waved and pointed at my teddy bear." Jessica's bedroom was on the ground floor, facing the backyard. There was no legitimate reason for a delivery man to be in their backyard. Looking through Emma's window, Jessica called the delivery company the next morning. After being transferred between several departments, she finally spoke to a supervisor, who told her something that made her hands shake. There was no record of any deliveries to her address. The company had no employee matching the description of the man who had been bringing packages to her house. Jessica immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they examined the toys that had been delivered. Hidden inside the teddy bear's stuffing, they found a small recording device. The delivery man had been listening to conversations in Emma's bedroom for weeks. But it got worse. Inside the other toys, police found tiny cameras. This man had been watching Emma play, recording her daily routines, and listening to her conversations. The investigation revealed that this predator had been studying Jessica's family for months before the delivery started. He knew Jessica worked from home, knew Emma's school schedule, and had even learned the layout of their house. Police set up surveillance, hoping to catch the fake delivery man on his next visit. But he never came back. Somehow, he knew the police were involved. The case remained unsolved until 3 months later, when a similar pattern was reported in a town 50 miles away. Another single mother, another young daughter, another mysterious delivery man asking too many questions. This time, police were ready. When they arrested the fake delivery man, they found a van equipped with printing equipment for creating fake delivery labels, uniforms from multiple delivery companies, and recording equipment for making surveillance devices. His real name was Thomas Brennan, a registered sex offender who had been using the delivery man disguise to target single mothers with young daughters across 3 states. In Thomas's apartment, police found detailed files on dozens of families. Photos, home addresses, work schedules, children's school information, and recordings from hidden devices he had planted in their homes. Some families had been under surveillance for over a year without knowing it. Thomas had perfected his system. He would watch a house for weeks, learning the family's routines. Then he would approach as a friendly delivery man. gradually gaining trust while gathering information and planting surveillance equipment. The most chilling discovery was Thomas's selection criteria. He specifically targeted single mothers because he believed they were more likely to trust a helpful delivery person. He looked for homes with young children and no visible security systems. Thomas Brennan was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but investigators believe he may have targeted over 100 families during his 5-year crime spree. Jessica and Emma moved to a different state after the trial. Emma, now in therapy, still has nightmares about the nice delivery man who turned out to be watching her every move. The most terrifying part of this story is how easy it was for Thomas to gain access to their lives. He wore a uniform, carried packages, and seemed professional. Jessica had no reason to be suspicious until it was almost too late. How many delivery people do you see each week? How many of them do you really look at carefully? How do you know that the person in the uniform is who they claim to be? The next time someone delivers a package you didn't order, remember Jessica and Emma's story, because sometimes the person at your door isn't bringing a gift, they're bringing danger. 6 mystery men, 6 terrifying stories, and the most frightening part? These predators are still out there. They're the helpful neighbor who knows too much about your routine, the substitute teacher who asks the wrong questions, the photographer who captures more than memories, the delivery man who brings packages you never ordered. They walk among us, wearing masks of normalcy, while hiding intentions that would chill your soul. They study us, learn our weaknesses, and strike when we least expect it. Tonight, when you lock your doors and turn off your lights, remember these stories. Remember that evil doesn't always announce itself with dramatic music and obvious warning signs. Sometimes, evil wears a uniform. Sometimes, it offers to help. Sometimes, it smiles and waves and seems like the nicest person you've ever met, until you discover what it really wants. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Sweet dreams. If these stories made your skin crawl, like the video, it tells the algorithm you survived. Subscribe and turn on the bell. We drop new nightmares regularly. Share with someone brave, or someone who thinks they are. Comment below. We want to know what you would have done. Some stories don't end when the lights come on. This is Dread Dynasty. We'll see you in the next scare.